Okay, we're going to move into our second session of the morning, and then after this session, there'll be a break. We have two more speakers this morning, and we'll start with Marti Witter. Marti is from, excuse me. Sorry, I taught high school for a long time. She'll be talking about, Marti is the fire ecologist at the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area, but she's also the fire ecologist for, I think, Marti Channel Islands as well, and I think you wrote the other thing, Cabrillo National Monument as well. I didn't know that. You've been there since 2001. And she's going to be talking about the Wildland Fire Resilient Landscape Collaborative. Marti, that's right. You're up right now. Stop washing those dishes. No.
Oh, okay. I'm surprised. Sorry, I was going to wander around and look at the bagels for a while. It's like, so Nicole was the one who invited me to give this talk, and oh, thank you. Yes, Nicole, is this about right? Okay. Nicole invited me to give this talk because we've heard all of the issues that surround the vulnerabilities of Chaparral, but we are a land management agency in the Santa Monica Mountains, State Parks and National Park Service, and it's how we address these problems. And Max had that great graph. It was sort of the natural system going through its processes, the human system going through its processes, but there was a little overlap in the wildland interface that was, you need to address that with policy and management, and what was the third one? Policy management. Anyway, so so that's where this talk lies, is sort of the intersection of that and what we try to do. And you've seen a lot of the Santa Monica Mountains already in this talk, because there's been a lot of research and interest, and the Santa Monicas provide a bit of a microcosm of the Southern California landscape. So it's an incredibly rich, diverse landscape. A lot of it is still intact. It still maintains a lot of its ecosystem values, but it also confronts a lot of the major problems we see in Southern California. So there's intense development pressures. We have habitat fragmentation, we have invasive weeds, and of course, we are the poster child for the classic Southern California overburned landscape. And this is a fire frequency map. Warmer colors are more frequent fires. And what do I press to make this? Oh, there. So when Steve Davis gave his talk yesterday, Pepperdine is sort of around there at the mouth of Malibu Canyon. So wildly overburned landscapes. And this is just another way of looking at it. It's taking the FRID data that Hugh has shown, and it's just showing how far our landscape has departed in terms of the number of times that vegetation has burned. So there's only, the green is the amount of landscape that falls into what would be a normal fire return interval. So it's a lot. So when I started working for the Park Service in 2001, our first task was to rewrite our fire management plan. And at that time, we had to, we wrote hundreds and hundreds of pages talking about the fire regime and what should happen and blah, 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 blah. We just recently rewrote it, and now we've condensed it down. So our wildland fire issue in the Santa Monica Mountains is described as large, intense wildfires between 5,000 and 25,000 acres occur approximately every 3 to 7 years in the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. With the extensive wildland urban intermix of homes and natural areas, lives and property are at risk from wildfire. Fire-adapted native plant communities are also at risk from short fire return intervals and increased fire frequency due to human ignitions. So that's sort of that's our wildfire landscape. There has been, and there's going to be still more talk about the threat of type conversion. And this is, ever since we were developing our fire management plan, this is a risk that we've recognized and have struggled with. And we really haven't even been able to quantify, so how much type conversion has occurred in the Santa Monica Mountains in the 20th and 21st century. But as Alex will talk, or John, I guess John is going to be talking about Alex's work. Alex has just finished an analysis that shows that about 36% of the chaparral that was mapped in the 1940s has been either completely converted to grasslands or into a degraded vegetation type with a large percentage of grasslands. So it's a threat that has degraded our landscape, and it's a continuing threat. And I just wanted to make one other point, is that the map on the left is one of the vegetation type maps in the 1930s, showing where we had coastal sage scrub at that time. But those little red dots are all grassland plots that we've been measuring after prescribed fires in the Santa Monica Mountains. And the thing that's really not talked about is that when you have type conversion from these shrublands to grasslands, that one of the components of the ecosystem that you lose is this incredibly rich, diverse annual flora. And that doesn't seem to be coming back. And I don't think that really gets quite enough attention. So we have an incredibly flammable landscape intermixed with human habitations. But it's, as Emma, we're going to spend hours and days about the values that this vegetation type removes. So our mantra is really, do not remove unless necessary. There will be times when it's necessary, but do it thoughtfully and do it carefully. And this is a slide that I first saw in 2003, and John Keeley was showing it at a symposium like the one we just had up in Northern California after the 2003 fires. And he asked the question, why have there continued to be increased fire losses with each decade since the Bel Air fire in 1961? And I just updated it to add the 2017 fire year. So that clearly, that question has not been answered yet. So I think that one of the problems is that in the past, and still occasionally, when people talk about, well, how are we going to manage this wildfire situation? The first thing that comes out is this fire behavior triangle, and it's fire behavior is based on weather and topography and fuel. You can't do anything about weather, you can't do anything about topography, so you have to work on the fuels. But if you look at a chaparral fire regime versus a mixed conifer fire regime in balance, it's not just the fuels that are driving those differences. So good things have started to happen in the Santa Monica Mountains. Probably about 10 years ago, LA County Supervisor Zev Yaroslavsky and the LA County Fire Department decided to bring together at one table all of the people in the Santa Monica Mountains who were working with wildfire management. And they formed a group. It's called the Santa Monica Mountains Fire Safe Alliance. And what they tried to do is that the group was formed to protect the communities in the mountains, but they added the phrase, and preserve the natural resources of the Santa Monica Mountains. So it was really trying to accomplish these two goals together. And important elements of what they did was that it was a collaboration. So people were coming together, bringing what they did and their knowledge with what other people did and their knowledge, because we all have different missions, but we do share that common objective. And so the idea was to try to bring together people to integrate best management practices. So a lot of this was initially focused on defensible space, but it's while protecting wildlands. So there have been a number of products that came out of that effort. The first big one was the Santa Monica Mountains Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So this is a really large effort that involved, I think, 29 community meetings, hundreds of people, years of staff time from people from the fire departments, from the parks agencies, and it's been signed at the highest levels. So it's a guideline for both Ventura County and Los Angeles County, signed by the supervisors, and then Ventura County Fire and Los Angeles County Fire, signed by their fire chiefs. So it's a roadmap. And really wonderful things came out of that long period of developing this plan, long and painful. It really had great meetings. And I have to say, so one of the outcomes of that meeting is Beth Burnham, who's in the audience. Interested citizens took it upon themselves to form fire safe committees and educate their communities. And the level of work and sophistication is really phenomenal. And so there's a random element of what will bear fruit and what things will come out. But one of the really important things, and that's demonstrated here, is that the fire department's message is they're completely emphasizing the thought that defensible space is probably the most important thing we can do in addition to house hardening, but it's really focusing a message on we're starting to work from the house out. We want to protect lives and property, and the best way to do that is to start to do your fuel modification, house hardening, and start from the house out. So it's moving away from landscape level changes to a much more focused approach. So the Fire Safe Alliance is, we meet 3 times a year or 4 times a year, and it's a chance to come in, and not everyone's always there. But at its core, there are people who have committed to being a part of that group. And so while we're not working on things all the time, the relationships are there, and when a problem comes up, they can be addressed. So it's really a potent and powerful group of organizations. We have local agencies and fire organizations, the land management agencies and conservation organizations, so the state parks, the land conservancies, actually the forests have worked with us on different issues. We have important collaborators like Southern California Edison and the Water District and the insurance people and our representatives to the state government. And then of course, these community organizations and fire safe councils are invaluable and are doing actually a lot of the on the ground work that's going on. And a lot of the scientists in this room who've given talks and who are here today and who are out in the world, we have an incredibly strong science group that has done work and has interest in the Santa Monica Mountains. So we really have all the pieces in place to do work together. So the Santa Monica Mountains Fire Safe Alliance has started about 10 years ago, and we continue to work together and we do what we can. At the same time, we were sort of doing that local work. Back in Washington, the fire management, the latest iteration of the National Fire Program policy was being changed again. I mean, it happens on a 10-year cycle. But so that was sort of working around in the background, and they were developing something called the cohesive strategy. And the National Cohesive Strategy is, it has three major prongs of what it's focused on, three areas. So instead of just, we're going to do the fuels, it's instead they've reoriented their, how they look at it. And they have three goals: to restore and maintain resilient landscapes, create fire-adapted communities, and respond to wildfire. And this plan came out in about 2014, and it's out there, but a lot of people go, cohesive strategy, what does that mean? So it's just, they need better terminology. But the first time I saw what they were actually trying to do, I was so excited. It was just a transformative moment. So the idea behind this is that it's based on a conceptual model, looking at comparative risk assessments to evaluate management actions that can actually change wildfire outcomes. So that means you're actually looking at what you want to do, and it's completely flexible. So this is a nationwide program, and with the number of different regimes we have and human patterns, it gives you incredible flexibility. So the way the model looks is the little circles are things that contribute to, actually, what is this? I'm sorry about you people on the left side. So here's what we're concerned about: fire extent and intensity. And then as a result of that fire extent, what are the consequences? And then can we change these? So these are the things that contribute to fire intensity and extent. So suppression response, how fast people can get there, the fuel loads, ignitions, weather, topography. And then these are the kinds of actions you can do that might have an effect on these drivers of fire extent and intensity. So your response capacity, how well you can suppress, fuel treatments to modify the fuels, also affecting fire extent and intensity, prevention programs, you prevent that ignition, you prevent that fire, and weather and topography. And then importantly, reducing exposure that have these adverse impacts during wildfire. So to me, what this opened up was this incredible opportunity to look differently at what can we do in Southern California besides doing prescribed burning. So if you look at this, so now your goal is to restore and maintain resilient landscapes. So for us, that's maintaining our chaparral landscapes, and clearly we need to reduce the amount of fire frequency. So what kinds of things can we do? Well, you don't need to do landscape level fuel treatments because that's adding to the problem. You definitely want to have that strong resource capacity to be able to put out the fires when they start. But again, it's sort of, if you want to restore and maintain a resilient landscape, prevention is really one of the most important things you can do. You want to reduce ignitions. You want to reduce the number of times you have big fires that burn up 280,000 acres of your landscape. So these are just, I think this first came out in 2011, and I was so excited about it. I think I gave a version of this talk at the Medicos meeting. And so it was just ideas like, undergrounding power lines, increasing arson patrols, banned power tools, roadside mitigations. There's 1,000 things you could think of to do, but the objective is to reduce the area burned. And then again, if you want to think about creating fire-adapted communities, here's, again, fuels treatments are important, but fuels treatments really need to be focused on reducing exposure. of those things that you most value around homes and people. And this also is like, well, that weather and topography you can't do anything about. You can give red flag alerts, and you can so be sure that people are warned to reduce their exposure. These existing indefensible things, you can take actions. So that was the idea. So in 2015, the federal government came up with the idea for what they call resilient landscape collaboratives. And these were ideas to fund people to come together and do activities to make a change. So we applied for a proposal because we had that infrastructure in place and we were ready to go. So we made explicit our vision, mission, goals, and we had a strategic plan, so like 20 pages of actual things on the ground that you could do. But we hit a bump in the road. So in the spring, we applied for a proposal. In the fall, we were funded. Oops, I missed the critical part. In November, we had unexpected election results. And in May, the whole program disappeared. So I think to move forward, the ideas are still out there. The people are still out there. Different people are working on different pieces of it. So I think the next step I would take is try to find one person who could be a focal point. We need a stable organization with a point of contact. We need leadership to go out and reach with all those partners and decide what we could do in the future. We need some inspiration. We need some imagination. We definitely need better messaging and a compelling narrative. So I leave you with this. I think prevention, Smokey should be given some credit.
Leave that slide up so we can all get a photo of that.
All right.